Here we go.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Will Evans. I work on campus in RecWell, or colloquially known as the Co-Rec. I'm their Assistant Director of Health and Wellness Programs, which is just a very long title to say that I do health education and promotion on campus. And today I'm excited to talk about mental wellness. And part of that is some of the services that we offer at RecWell that you may not know about. So on the next slide, you'll see some of those. And I'm just going to, this isn't like a sales pitch. I'm not trying to make you buy anything. Most of these services are free, which is why I really want to tell you about. We were having a brief conversation about paying the co-rec fee before this began. And a lot of people don't know that that co-rec fee actually includes all the bullets at the top, those services at no additional cost, because you've already paid for them, right? But a lot of people just think your co-rec fee gives you access to a gym. But you actually get unlimited consultations with a registered dietitian who can help you kind of structure your meal plan for whatever goals you have, weight gain, weight loss. Even if you or someone you may know may be struggling from an eating disorder, she can help with that, or stress eating, things like that. We have light therapy to help with kind of the winter months coming up. A lot of people, their mood gets affected by the lack of sunlight and the cold and the short days. And light therapy is just a very natural way to kind of reorient your emotional self and get you back to being normal you. We offer lots of coaching options here, so I'm just going to run through all of these. Wellness coaching, nutrition coaching, and financial education coaching. Wellness coaching is best described as if you're tired of never meeting your New Year's resolution, we are here to make sure that does not happen this year, right? So we work with you to figure out what values and priorities and kind of other things that are important to you, how can we integrate those into your goals to kind of build this roadmap to get you to where you want to go? And we provide resources and accountability along the way. Nutrition coaching, they work under a registered dietitian. If you just have more general nutrition questions, they can answer all those. So if you're tired of surfing through different web articles and one says eggs are bad for you and the other says eggs are good, and you're like, screw it, I don't know which one it is, I'm just going to not eat eggs. Don't do that, because we'll answer the question for you, so you don't have to trust Google and Google's many different responses, right? Financial education. The thing that we found is that you're going to leave Purdue with a wonderful degree, but if it's not in business or finance, that degree will likely not tell you how to manage your money well, right? And so you're going to go to your new job, get slapped with a bunch of paperwork, and it's going to say you have to choose your retirement package in the next month, and if you don't do it, we're going to pick for you. And that can be really stressful for a lot of new people in their first job. We'll help you with that, if you've never had a budget before in your life, or you want to get a little bit more familiar with investment options. Our financial education specialist is there for you. And then finally, we have our mindfulness room and guided meditations. Our guided meditations this semester are virtual, and that virtual schedule is posted online. And then finally, some additional services that do come with a slight cost. Cooking demos, unfortunately, those are not happening this semester in the COVID era. But when they come back, they're $10 per demo. It's like attending a cooking show that you might watch on TV. You, as the audience, watch one of our cooking instructors prep the meal, learn how to make it, leave with a recipe card, and then you get to taste test the food at the end. Wellness classes, we have mindfulness series and different series over different wellness topics you can participate in. And then finally, massage therapy from our professional licensed massage therapists. So these are all the things. And I show you this list, again, not to be like, come buy our stuff, but to be like, the Co-Rec is a beautiful 5-story gym, but we're more than just a gym. We care about your holistic well-being, not just your physical activity and exercise. All right, on the next slide, we'll jump into what kind of we're going to be talking about. But before we get there, I just want to give you a heads up. To make this a little bit more virtual friendly, we've added some cues throughout the slides. Yes, no questions. What we're going to do is we're going to substitute these buttons. If you just move your cursor, you'll see a reactions button in Zoom. If you hit that, you'll see an applause button or a clap button, and then also a thumbs up button. What we'll do, since thumbs up usually means yes, we'll make that the yes button, and the applause button can mean no. So whenever there's a question, you can just hit that, and then everyone will be able to tell people's responses. An easy way to give visual feedback without having to interrupt or anything. And then if you see a breakout session box, that just means we're going to pause and have like a breakout discussion about whatever we're talking about, just to hear everyone's feedback, right? Because we can all learn from each other. All right, moving on. These are the things we're going to talk about. It's 5 things, and that's a lot to cover in 50 minutes, right? But even though it's a lot, I do want to say, if you have any questions about this, please interrupt me. Like, it does not bother me if you throw it in the chat box or whatever, because if you're like me, you're going to forget your question by the end of the presentation anyway, and what context you had the question in originally. And so it may not be worth it to wait. So please interrupt me. It will not bother me at all. I'm more than happy to pause and hammer down into a topic a little bit more. So we're going to jump into the first one, Purdue mental wellness. And what that means on the next slide, we just have a few stats about kind of the state of mental health and wellness here at Purdue. And so this first stat is not Purdue specific, but it is a good representation of colleges and universities nationwide in the United States. So there's an organization called the American College Health Association, and every year they give colleges and universities the opportunity to administer what's called the National College Health Assessment. And this assessment is a collaboration and kind of a mix match and a cornucopia of all these different health and wellness validated scales and assessments in one big assessment. And so you can take this, and it gives college administrators a pretty good idea of where their students are health and wellness wise. And one of the biggest things that always pops up, and it's always in the 90 percentile, always, is stress, right? So 92% of college students nationwide said in the last year they did report moderate to extreme stress. Now, I don't share this to spread a doom and gloom message, right? It's not like this is hopeless, like the world's ending. Like, no. I share this with you to normalize stress, right? And let's just be honest, those 8% of people who said they did not experience this, they're lying, you know, like don't kid yourselves. But I share this because if you experience stress, you may also mistakenly think that, oh my gosh, I'm the only one that doesn't have my life together. Like, I'm the only one who's stressed out or feeling overwhelmed. And that's just simply not the case, right? The overwhelming majority of college students also experience moderate to extreme stress from time to time, right? And so the point of this, again, is not, it's hopeless. The point is, you are perfectly okay if you experience a little bit of stress or anxiety, but we will talk about things to notice when it becomes too much and when it is appropriate to seek out some help for either yourself or other people. All right, the next stat on the next slide, about a quarter, this is a Purdue specific stat, about a quarter of Purdue students in 2019 reported stopping a usual activity because they felt so sad or hopeless in the last year, right? And this is one of the more, I try not to use this term lightly, but one of the more like depressing stats that we have about our campus, because that's a quarter of, like, just imagine all the pleasant activities that students could do. Intramurals, going to the gym, student organizations, volunteer work, just even like hanging out with friends or doing whatever you want to do, like on a Friday or Saturday night. A quarter of students have reported stopping doing that because they felt sad or hopeless in the last year, right? And so mental health is very much a real present thing on college campuses, on Purdue's campus. And today we're going to talk about what can we do to look out for ourselves and also look out for others so that we can help avoid becoming one of these statistics, right? So those are kind of some of the beginning stats. I'm done with the stats. We're going to instead transition to what can we do about this? Now that we're aware of the problem, what's our role to play in fixing it, right? So on the next slide, what we have, just to kind of more like normalize this even more, this is your first opportunity to use these yes, no buttons if you want. Just as I go through each one, remember, just hit thumbs up for yes or applause for no. Have you ever been late to class, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm totally applauding because I've definitely been late to class, right? If you also just want to unmute yourself, that's totally fine too. Have you ever experienced, I'm so sorry, going back one, roommate problems, right? I'm sure we all have. If you're living by yourself, congrats, maybe you don't have roommate problems, but if you're not, like most college students, you probably do. Or if you're married and have a family, your roommate is now your family, and there's certainly some things that can pop up at home that aren't the most easy to deal with from time to time. Stress from due dates, right? Yes, please, absolutely. Yes. Issues with professors, especially in grad school, right? Like there seems to be so much pressure and like assignments and extra responsibilities you weren't really anticipating and things like that. Feeling like there's too much to do all the time, absolutely, right? And the list goes on and on and on. Helping a friend with a struggle, missing home, especially now that travel is kind of limited, or you shouldn't be doing it, or maybe you're not. Maybe you can't get home due to COVID, right? We do have students in that situation. So all these things, again, I'm not saying it's bad to experience these things necessarily, but they can contribute to those stats that we talked about before, right? And mental health isn't just something that like changes overnight. It's usually a conglomerate of small things adding up over time that slowly change your kind of perception and the way you experience the world, which can then lead to more harmful mental health concerns, right? Like no one just goes from not being anxious to suddenly the next day being anxious, right? Like it's in part, it is partly a learned process, right? And some of these things that are just a natural part of the college experience can be a contributing factor to our mental health and wellness, right? So on the next slide, we do have some common issues that Boilermakers face, right? So beyond what we mentioned before, beyond the common college experiences, these are some things a lot of people may not talk about, right? But still contribute to either positive or negative mental health and wellness status. One is social acceptance, especially for new students on campus, right? They just left their home. They traveled sometimes thousands of miles to get here. They don't know anyone. They don't know the local area. They don't know the food, the culture of campus, whatever. And then they have to like suddenly make friends with people, right? And that's stressful in whatever stage of life you're in, right? And so trying to learn your place on campus can be a difficult and stressful time. Balancing expectations from self, others, and society. What I mean by that is you come to Purdue, you have these expectations for yourself. I'm going to make straight A's. I'm going to have this type of resume once I leave. I want to have a job before I graduate, right? Like that's my goal. You have all these expectations for yourself, but sometimes if you're not careful, they can start becoming perfectionistic, right? Like I won't be happy unless I make 100, right? Like you're kind of giving the status and control over your mental health over to an external factor, right? Like it's no longer you that controls your happiness, it's the test result, right? And again, like you do control the test result, but like there's not much difference between 98 and 100, right? But if you're saying you won't be happy unless you make 100, that's a really perfectionistic expectation, right? Or sometimes you're trying to balance expectations from other people. And the category other here, I'm meaning is like your close circle of friends and family, right? Or the people who have heavy influence over your life, right? And sometimes these people have great expectations for us, right? Your best friends probably want something good for you. Your advisor and teacher probably in the end want something good for you. Your family wants something good for you. But it can become difficult when their expectations kind of clash with your sense of self and your values and the way that you want to live out life, right? And then you're stuck at a crossroads where do I please other people knowing that I may not be completely fulfilled in living out other people's expectations? Or do I live out my own expectations and be fulfilled, but risk disappointing or saddening other people, right? And then finally, we have societal expectations. These usually come in the form of kind of the topics we were discussing a little bit before this presentation, like any form of discrimination, racism, sexism, genderism, things like that, right? And so if society says you can't do something because of who you are, and that meshes with your sense of self, again, you have to decide, okay, well, I'm gonna do what I want and not let society dictate, how I feel or how I should feel, right? And then the list goes on and on. Academics, a lot of people stress about this, and it probably is talked about a lot, but not to the depth that it really stresses people out, Homesickness, a lot of people may be embarrassed to admit that they miss home, right? They try to like tough it out and say, nah, it's fine, I don't need to go home, it's all right. But really you do miss it. Extracurricular involvement in jobs. Some people, they need that other job to make it through school financially, right? And that can be a stressor on them. But not only are they a full-time student, but they have this part-time job or the side gig that they have to do to support themselves, right? which can lead to financial problems, right? So loans, figuring out a way to pay for school. Financial problems could also be like with research, with grants and things like that, right? So all these things, again, just are one more straw on the camel's back that can lead to either positive or negative mental health and wellness concerns, right? So, all right, moving on. Now that we kind of have a picture of all the things that are either openly talked about or kind of kept quiet, and how they play out in the statistics on college campus mental health and wellness, what can we do with this complete picture? What can we as individuals, how can we go from just being a bystander, but now that we're informed, we can say, hey, I know that a lot of people are struggling. I know that certain circumstances can increase someone's risk of adverse mental health, like homesickness or struggles with friends and family. What can we do? And the first thing that we can do is realize some misconceptions we have about mental health that we may not even realize, right? And the best way I find to do this is through visual cues. So on the next slide, we have some pictures of some individuals going through physical health problems, right? So in the first picture on the left, we have a person hooked up to an IV bag and a heart rate monitor, presumably in a hospital, and the visiting person says here, well, lying in bed obviously isn't helping you. You need to try something else, right? Like you would never in your life go to a hospital and say that to a friend who's hooked up to a heart rate monitor and medication, and presumably, according to this picture, it looks like they're unconscious, right? Like you wouldn't do that, right? But take all the hospital environment stuff away and just imagine this person lying in bed at home and they're depressed, not with a physical health problem, with a mental health problem. A lot of us unknowingly say unhelpful things like this. Well, you just need to try getting up and getting outside, and I'm sure you'll feel better. You just need to not lay around the house all day. You need to get out and do something, and that'll really like perk up your attitude, right? Like if it's not helpful in a physical health setting, it's probably not helpful in a mental health setting, right? And these examples go on and on. The middle one's my favorite because both cartoon people in this character seem to have a vastly unconcerned facial expression given what's happening here, right? So this guy somehow has lost a limb, right? And their friend or person there is saying, you just need to change your frame of mind and then you'll feel better, right? Like, no. Like there is no getting over my limb being cut off, right? Like this is well beyond that, right? And again, you wouldn't and you shouldn't say this to someone with like anxiety or depression or any other mental health concern, like, hey, just change your frame of mind. Like, it's so simple. Just get out of your own head and then you'll feel better and that's fine, right? Because here's the thing. If it were that simple, mental health wouldn't be a problem, you know? Like if it were as simple as just getting out of bed and going outside or just changing our frame of mind, we wouldn't need counselors and therapists and psychologists and you know, all these other mental health fields that are crucial for our society. And then the last one, the guy with a common cold, presumably throwing up. And this guy is like, well, have you tried, not having the flu? Have you just tried, not being so sad and depressed all the time? Like this picture to me is like if you've ever been in an argument with a significant other or a close friend, and what's never helpful in those situations? When someone just says, you just need to calm down. Like in the history of all time, that statement has never made anyone calm down when it's uttered. Right? Like if I'm already mad, telling me to calm down is only going to make me madder. Right? And so if it doesn't work when we're just a little bit upset, why on earth would it work when we're depressed or anxious or stressed and things like that? Right? You just need to be happier. And here's another thing. People with depression or anxiety or lots of stress, they want to be happier. It's not like they're walking around like very happy that they're depressed. So saying something like, you just need to be happier is also insinuating that they haven't even thought of that before you uttered it, right? It's like, oh, well, have you thought about just trying to change your mind about how you're reacting to situations? Believe me, they have, but they just feel stuck and in a rut and like it's hopeless, right? Okay, so moving forward on the next slide. So that's our first misconception, right? I'm going to shut up and, oh, I forgot to make sure this was a thing. So if we need to skip this, that's all right. If we did not set up sharing screen options to include computer audio, that's okay. We can skip this video. But let's click play and see if we can hear the sound. Ooh, we can't. That's okay. I will give a brief synopsis of what this is.
Is this okay?
I can hear it now, yeah.
Depression was often described as simply a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Let's start from the beginning.
Scientists believe that 350 million people affected by depression worldwide. It's no doubt an incredibly real and serious issue. But what exactly is going on inside of a depressed person? Is there a biological basis for these intense feelings of sadness? In the past, depression was often described as simply a chemical imbalance in the brain. Specifically, scientists believe that a lack of the neurotransmitter serotonin was to blame, which is often referred to as the feel-good chemical. However, the only real evidence for this was that when some depressed people were prescribed drugs which increased serotonin levels, it helped alleviate their symptoms. But while chemicals most certainly are involved, this view doesn't really capture just how complex depression is. In recent years, scientists began to notice that the brain cell growth and connections may actually play a larger role. When we look at the brain of a depressed person, studies show that the hippocampus tends to be much smaller than average. Other areas of the brain are also physically affected, but this region in particular controls memory and emotion. And the longer a person has been depressed, the smaller the hippocampus becomes. The cells and networks literally deteriorate. It turns out that stress may actually be a main trigger in the decrease of new neurons in this area of the brain. In fact, studies have shown that when this region of the brain is regenerated and new neurons are stimulated, mood improves. Interestingly, many modern drugs, including those which affect serotonin levels, have an indirect effect on the growth of brain cells. This is likely why serotonin-based drugs seem to help some patients, but not for the reasons we once thought. Instead, they promote the release of other chemicals which ultimately stimulate neurogenesis or the growth of new neurons. Knowing this, some scientists now believe focus should be on drugs which directly affect neurogenesis. But while your neurons and chemicals may be the direct influencers, many genetic factors have been discovered as well. One particular study found that a variation in the serotonin transporter gene leaves individuals more vulnerable to depression. Every individual has 2 copies of the gene, one from each parent, and this gene can either be short or long. After tracking 800 young adults over 5 years, the study revealed that 33% of individuals with one short version became depressed after stressful life events, and people with 2 short genes fared even worse. On the other hand, those with 2 long genes were much less likely to become depressed with similar life stress. Many other genes have been identified which increase the likelihood of depression too, and it makes sense when you consider that depression and bipolar disorder both run in families. Studies of identical twins show that if one has bipolar disorder, the other has a 60 to 80% chance of developing it too. So while the true cause or causes of depression have yet to be pinned down precisely, and trust us, there's a huge list of other variables that studies suggest may come into play, it's important to remember that depression is a disease with a biological basis, along with psychological and social implications. It's not simply a weakness that somebody should get over, or even something that we have a say in. And just like heart disease or cancer, shedding light onto the subject is of the utmost importance in order to bring funding and proper research.
Awesome. So, anything stand out to you guys that maybe you hadn't considered before in relation to mental health or wellness that was discussed in this video?
I like the stuff about the SSRIs and how
Yeah.
it helps with neurogenesis. That's interesting because
Yeah.
that's not the intended use, but after a while, it just led to something else. And
Right. Yeah. Which is a great discovery of how a very common drug could have alternative purposes, right? And I always got to figure out how can we increase the benefit of this drug to do this specific task instead of it just being like a side kind of thing, right?
yeah, I think they do something similar with levodopa. They used it for Parkinson's, and now it helps with other cognitive impairment as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Anything else stand out to anyone else?
I think Michelle unmuted herself. I'm sorry if I...
Oh.
No, yeah, that's okay. I think I can also start my video too. Okay, hi. So I like the visual description of having the smaller, I forgot the serotonin enhancing gene or something.
Yeah, the serotonin transporter gene.
Right, right, and how it kind of seems like it's more of a spectrum of how people can experience these feelings. So I appreciated that kind of spectrum kind of outlook.
Yeah. And that's so true, because for the longest time, mental health was kind of seen as personal weakness when it presented in people. And now we're like, okay, but wait, there's actual like a genetic and biological foundation to it too, right? We're not saying that your genes are 100% the cause of mental health problems, but they are a large contributing factor especially when you look at correlational studies like this, where it's like, well, hey, people with 2 short genes, they are way more likely to experience mental health problems when faced with similar adverse events like the video talked about, right? So I think that really helps people understand that, all right, it doesn't just come down to personal weakness like we used to think, but it's actually like some of this is outside of our control. And if that's the case, how can we help people, right? Perfect. So on the next slide, we have a little, that's okay. Videos are always weird to transition out of.
There we go.
Perfect. So not only is a misconception that, mental illness only comes down to the individual's perspective or choice to feel that way, but another misconception is treatment timelines. Comparing, again, physical health problems to mental health problems. With physical health problems, there's usually a very clear timeline, right? Like you break your bone, you go in, they put you in a cast, they say, wear this cast for like 1 or 2 months, come back, take it off, and you'll be good to go, right? That's a very clear, I will be fully healed in 2 months, and I know this is true kind of thing, right? With mental health, treatments can vary from person to person and from mental health concern to mental health concern, right? So just because one friend went to counseling and got better in a couple of months doesn't mean that another friend with the exact same diagnosis is going to get well in a couple of months. It may take them a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, right? And so you could have the onset of symptoms kind of seen in this visual, and then treatment, continued treatment. You could relapse, and I don't mean relapse as to like with drugs, although that could be one of your mental health concerns, is drug addiction. But you could just relapse in that you were doing great, and then suddenly this depressive episode kind of came over you again, right? So you might need to go back to treatment or back to antidepressants or whatever you choose, right? And then can continue treatment again. So the biggest takeaway from this, for me at least, is to be patient and kind of temper your expectations once someone says, I'm going to therapy for this. Because that should not in any way tell you that, oh, good, the problem's now over, we're done, right? It should tell you that all you need to do is congratulate and support this person for going to therapy and continue that support for as long as this person needs to be in therapy for, right? And you should never like shame them for, my goodness, like you've been going for like, whatever, like 6 years and like it's still not getting any better. Well, that's their story. And your story is your story. So let them do them and you do you, and then just support them along the way, right? All right. So on our next slide here, we have, if you will click that little, there's a link up there, thefeelingswheel.com. If you click that, it should open up a browser here. And you may have to share your screen for us to see the browser. I'm sorry, there's so many things I should have told you before I began. If you want
sharing the PowerPoint, so
okay, no problem. If you also wanted to, for those of you watching, you can go to this website yourself.
Yeah, I can just copy paste it in the chat, actually.
Perfect, that'd be great. It's a super simple website. It's literally just a giant wheel of many different feelings, right? And if you click on that, you'll see how intricate and vast the many different feelings that we can have actually are, right? And so I show you this to also help you realize that sometimes not only is it important to be patient with people as they're in treatment, it's important to be patient and understanding and considerate of people in the very onset of symptoms, right? Because they may not know how to describe how they're feeling. And just imagine not even being able to describe what you're going through and how that would probably even make you feel even more embarrassed and ashamed to try to talk to other people about it, right? Because you can say at the very center of that wheel, we have very I'm not going to say basic because they're still complex, but easily recognizable emotions like sadness, surprise, happy, fear. And then as we branch out into the outer wheel, the outer rim of that wheel, we have different emotions that are related to the core emotions, but you can see how they're more nuanced and descriptive, right? So someone who's feeling apathetic or something like that, if you say, oh, you're just feeling sad. No, they're not feeling sad. They're feeling apathetic, but they may not know how to describe apathy, right? And so if you keep saying that, oh, well, it sounds like you're just sad, and they're like, oh, I'm not really that sad. I'm not really feeling down for doing anything. I just don't care about this stuff as much as I used to. And you just keep pressuring them and saying, well, it sounds like you're feeling sad. They're going to leave that conversation feeling misunderstood and not listened to. And it's not because you don't care about them. It's just because you weren't taking the time to let them process how they're feeling and then share that with you, right? So another misconception is don't just be patient with people. Just in very same way as how we don't always know what's wrong with us from a physical standpoint, which is why they go to the doctor and they can tell us. People may not understand and be able to describe how they're feeling from an emotional and mental standpoint either, right? And it's not your responsibility or your job to label that emotion for them. It's just your job to support them and be an open ear and listening, right? What we would do if we had more time in a larger group is we would actually play a game called Taboo, and we would break out, and your responsibility would be to pick an emotion from the outer wheel in that image and try to describe it without using the actual word itself, right? And once you do that, you may realize like, wow, that's actually kind of hard. Like picking any one of those emotions can be more difficult to describe. And then compare that to describing one of the emotions in the core of that wheel, right? Like, oh, that's easy, right? Like describe happy, the opposite of sad, right? Like describe surprised. Oh, it's when someone jumps out and you weren't expecting them and your heart races a little bit and you feel like, oh, I get it, right? But if you were to describe some of those harder things, people usually kind of choke up and they don't really know what you're talking about. And that's kind of the same feeling that others might get too when they feel uncomfortable talking about how they're feeling with others because they themselves may not fully understand it yet. And so what you can do in that instance is just be supportive of them, keep listening, don't get frustrated with them, don't be like, well, you don't even know what you're talking about. How can you not know how you're feeling, right? Because feelings are very, very complex, as this image and this website hopefully show you. There are many, many things that we can all feel, but we may not exactly know the words of how to describe them. All right, so on the next slide here, what we have, going through some warning signs. So we've talked about we painted a picture of mental wellness at Purdue, all the things that can affect us. We painted, given a good example of some common misconceptions we have about how we talk about and relate to mental health and wellness. So what are some warning signs that we can look out for in both ourselves and other people, right? And on the next slide, we have some of those. So some common signs of stress, anxiety, and depression include this list, right? So change in appetite, change in appetite, loss of interest in enjoyable activities. We kind of mentioned that before with that quarter of Purdue students stopping doing something that they enjoy. Less social interaction, feeling tired, easily irritable, lack of concentration, and thoughts of suicide, right? Now, obviously, you can feel tired and still be completely okay mentally, right? Maybe you just went to bed real late. You could also be irritable that day. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with you or someone else who's irritable. But if you notice some of these for a kind of extended period of time, that may be kind of a red flag to you to be like, all right, well, you haven't really felt like going out with us in a long time. Is there something up? Can I help with anything? Do you need to talk about something? Or if they kind of daydream out of conversations or maybe they do seem apathetic or uninterested in things that they used to like, these could all be kind of warning signs to you that, all right, what can I do as a friend to support you, right? And again, our next yes, no kind of reaction. Have you been comfortable asking a friend if they need support when you noticed something was off? Or did you just kind of let it go and think it'll sort itself out kind of thing? So let us know. I see some kind of I'm not too sure. Yeah, that's okay. I also see, okay, perfect. So I'm not trying to shame anyone, right? I'm just saying that there are many things that we can do. And hopefully this list gives you a better idea of when to ask some kind of caring questions to others about, hey, do you need my help or support, anything? All right. So we spent the least amount of time on warning signs because, full transparency again, I'm not a licensed therapist, right? So I'm not trying to teach you how to diagnose anyone. That's not my job. It's not your job. It is the job of licensed mental health workers, which we are all not. So I don't want to falsely empower you to go out and say that person's depressed because this guy from the CoRec said if you are irritable and not eating, that means you're depressed. That's not what that means, right? So they're just warning signs that something may be off, right? All right, so what can we do to care for other people and others, for ourselves and others if we notice some of these things, right? So on the next slide, having a conversation, things to say. A lot of people get really stuck because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, so they say nothing, right? My first piece of advice is saying nothing always leads to nothing, right? Saying something, even if it's the wrong thing to say, opens the door to other possibilities, right? So don't be like, well, I'm not a therapist, so I shouldn't say anything. That's not true, right? You can still be a very caring, good friend by saying something. So here are some examples of how to approach a situation. So step into their frame of reference, right? Remembering that huge emotion wheel. Even just saying something like, this sounds like a hard time and I'm sure it feels difficult. Is there anything I can do? Or you could even just say, wow, I really don't know what to say right now, but I'm just so glad you shared that with me and I'm here for you, right? That you don't have to have a solution. You don't have to sit down for 30 minutes and have a therapy session with this person. You just need to let them know that, phew, wow, yeah, that sounds really difficult. Like you said, I'm here for you. Let me know what I can do, right? And then if you need to express concerns, maybe you notice some of those warning signs, always frame it from your point of view, right? So, hey, I've noticed that you haven't really been around the last few times we hung out. Is there anything going on you want to talk about, right? I'm saying it from your point of view makes it come across as less blaming, and we'll talk about the opposite of these things on the next slide. But saying it from your point of view, it's just saying, hey, this is my perspective, and I may be wrong about this. I just want to let you know what I'm seeing and then let you fill in the blanks, right? I'm not trying to paint the whole picture for you. I'm just here to ask questions, right? Keep offering invitations. A lot of time people do have less social interaction or they quit doing things they previously enjoyed. That can be a real deterrent for people to want to ask them out to do things again. It's important to know that they do care, right? It's not like they quit caring about you. And so to keep offering that invitation to hang out or to come meet them and do whatever, even if they refuse every single time, you're still letting them know that I'm still here for you, right? Like I haven't given up on you, right? So even if it's just like, hey, we're all going to hang out this weekend, do you want to come with us? And even if they say no, that's okay. Like you have let them know that you're there for them and that you want to be a part of their life when they're ready to let you in, right? And then make direct offers to help, right? Can I come over tonight and help you study for the test? Because you know what never happens? A fulfillment on a vague offer never comes true. You guys should come over for dinner sometime. Oh yeah, man, that'd be great. You never go to dinner, It's just like a nice thing that you say. But if you say, hey, I would love to have you and your partner come over to dinner next Thursday night at my place, that's a set invitation and we can actually make plans around that, right? So make direct offers to help or direct invitations to hang out. Don't just say something vague like, we should hang out sometime, because that's easily dismissed and forgotten, All right, so on the next slide, we have some things to try to avoid, right? Speaking from your frame of reference, so on the last slide we said step into their frame of reference. It's not helpful like if you say, hey, well, when I'm feeling down, I just try to find things that I like to do, right? That's saying, hey, I have a solution. The way I handle things is the way you should handle things. And if you just try it my way, the world will be better, right? That's very often not helpful, and it just makes them feel unheard and unappreciated. Even though you're coming from a good standpoint, you're trying to help, just try to step into their shoes and see their perspective first, right? Point to things that seem to attribute blame. Why don't you want to hang out anymore, right? You see how that's different from saying things from your point of view. I've noticed that we haven't hung out in a while. Is there something I can do to help? But when you say things like with you statements, like you aren't doing this, you're feeling this, you're always sad, it comes across as like you're attributing blame to that person and they should feel bad for that, which does nothing to help improve their mental health or wellness in the moment, right? Do not reduce initiations to hang out or to help. So, someone might be like, should we invite Megan? And then someone else is like, nah, she's never in the mood anymore. Just don't even ask her. That can make Megan feel really left out. And like her friends, she may feel even worse because now she thinks, oh my gosh, not only am I affecting myself and I feel down, now I'm making other people feel down too. And I don't want to do that. It makes me feel even worse, right? And like we said before, vague offers to help. Just let me know if there's anything I can do, right? No one ever follows up on that, right? It's just like, but if you say, hey, I have some free time on Tuesday night, I would love to come over and help. Is there anything I can do to help you at this time? They may be more likely to say, all right, well, I know I'm not hindering you. You let me know that you're available, so I'm not being a burden. So yeah, sure. Can you come over and help me do this, right? On the next slide, we're going to talk about the power of saying no. And this is kind of more of a self-care technique, right? But it can also be with others. So learning to say no, going back to those expectations we talked about before from self, others, and society, learning to say no to things that clash with your sense of self and your values can be good, right? But it can also be very, very hard. So you have to kind of build up the skill of giving yourself the emotional permission to say no to people when it's appropriate, right? So what I'm not saying is just say no to everyone every single time. Then you come across like a jerk and really self-centered, right? But if someone says like, hey, we're all going out on Saturday and we really want you to come, don't be a stick in the mud, please come out, you need to come hang out with us. But you have a really important thing to get done for work that you know needs to get done. It's okay to say no, because you know what, there's going to be other Saturdays, but there's only one due date. And if you miss that one due date, you're screwed, or if someone, is pressuring you to do something you really don't want to do, and it clashes with your values and sense of self, you should always feel okay saying no, All right. The next thing is kind of with other people. How do I make sure that I'm having healthy boundaries with others, especially if they're going through a mental health concern or a time in their life, right? And the first kind of clue is if you always leave interactions with that person feeling tired or drained, like your battery is just dead after a conversation with that person every single time, that may be a cue that you're no longer able to help them to the level that they need, right? Because if you're feeling tired and drained, you're not really going to be of help to anyone, right? And so it may be a clue that, all right, you know what? It's time to just be honest with this person. And it's okay to do that, but in a caring, loving way, right? Like you can just say, hey, you know what? I've noticed that we've talked about this the last couple of times we've met up. I want you to know I care about you. You're always going to be my friend. But I think you may need to look at other services. Can I help you find those, right? Can I be the person that walks alongside you, goes to CAPS on campus, calls whatever resource you need, right? So be aware that you don't have to self-sacrifice yourself to the point that your own mental health starts suffering in order to help another person, right? You do have to have those healthy boundaries. Another one is if too much is asked of you, right? So if someone shares a secret with you or someone says something really drastic, it may be time to let other people know, right? Especially if the safety of another person is at risk, right? So if someone says something like, if they say anything that even makes you think that they might be considering suicide or self-harming or things like that, it is not okay to keep that a secret. There are other people on campus who can help that person and you navigate that situation. And you're not going to be letting that other person down by telling other people about it, right? I mean, don't tell everyone, tell the appropriate person, right? And so if you feel like someone is asking too much about you, we're going to cover in the campus resource section, which is coming up next, about some resources you can take advantage of to connect people with the right services that can help. And the first service here is the Office of the Dean of Students. The biggest thing I want to talk about here is kind of the bullet number 2, the Student of Concern report. The Student of Concern report is an excellent tool on the Office of Dean of Students website where you can fill out a form, either anonymously or include your private contact information, and you can fill it out for yourself or someone else. And all you have to do is say, hey, I've noticed that this person is exhibiting these signs. I'm really concerned about them. Tell them as much as you want about the context of the situation to give them an idea of what's going on. And then the Dean of Students will reach out to that person and invite them to come in. The last time we heard from them, 95% of students that they reached out to after getting a report agreed to come in, right? Because it's kind of that wake-up call for people. They're like, wow, someone was so concerned that they filled out a report for me, and now there's these people that can help me. Maybe I should go in, right? They usually, the overwhelming majority of people come into the Office of the Dean of Students to get help after someone fills out a report on their behalf, right? And then their contact information and some of their other services are on that slide too. The next one is Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS for short, right? And this one, CAPS has 2 locations on campus, both in both in the Push building and in the Psych building. And the Psych building, they're in room 1120. They do emergent crisis services, obviously group therapy, individual therapy, couples therapy, things like that. They can also connect you to services in the community that may be more appropriate for your individual needs, right? There used to be a bad reputation on campus that CAPS is really hard to get into. They have done a lot to change that. So they've put more staff on phone consultations and phone screenings to make sure that students get connected where they need to go sooner. They kind of limited the way they do, or not limited, they restructured the way they do individual counseling now with students to get them connected to resources in the community if need be. All right, so go ahead and advance to that Counseling and Psychological Services slide, just to let people see their contact information and some of their other services there. And then we will move on to the next slide, which is co-rec wellness programs. I've already talked about this in the beginning, so I'm not going to spend much time here, but just as a recap, if you think if you or someone you may know, if you have reason to believe that there is a eating disorder or stress eating problem present, our dietitian can see them for that, right? So I do want to let you know that we have that service available. We also have wellness coaching, financial education, and light therapy in the mindfulness room, like I mentioned before too. The next resource that we're going to talk about is Purdue Police. A lot of people get really scared when I mention the police and helping with like mental wellness, but the police here do have what they call the crisis intervention team, which is trained to handle really kind of intense, crises, right? So someone who may be experiencing a mental health concern, the police will go and talk to them. They also just do well-being checks. So if you haven't seen someone in a long time, you can call the Purdue Police and just say, hey, I'm really concerned about this person. If you know where they live, they'll go to that person's residence, knock on the door, make sure they're there, ask if they're doing okay, and things like that. So if you call the Purdue Police to go do a well-being check or a crisis intervention service, no one's going to get arrested. You should know that the police will probably show up in full uniform, fully dressed, and it may look intimidating, but they're not there to get anyone in trouble or arrest anyone. They're just there to help, right? The next one is the Purdue Student University Health Center, or PUSH. They offer a slew of services that are very helpful, including a women's clinic, sports medicine clinic, physical therapy, allergy and immunization clinic, and many other things. So if someone is experiencing stress because they're having a hard time, figuring out where am I going to go to get help for this certain physical health issue, PUSH can help, right? And then finally, we have the CARE office. CARE stands for Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education on campus. It is a confidential support for survivors of sexual harassment and or assault, right? And so they do offer a good amount of services to help with both the physical health and mental health, the environmental wellness, and all of that of survivors of sexual harassment. You can also report an incident of sexual harassment on their website, or call their 24/7 advocate call center at the number listed on the screen. And they're, I always say this hall wrong, Dewey, I think, Dewey Hall 139 on campus. That's where they're located at, right? We're going to pause here before we go to the next slide, but I just want to open it up for questions, comments, statements. Did we cover things that you liked? Did we not cover things that you wish we would have talked more about? We have a few more moments to talk about some stuff in case you want to know more about any one of the slides that we went through so far.
I had a question about the light therapy. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that's a free service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that's only with the seasonal affective disorder, I'm assuming?
It helps with seasonal affective disorder. It also, preliminary research is suggesting that it can help with some sleep disorders too. So light therapy is used best in the morning, which I know is not satisfactory for some people. They're like, why would I want to wake up earlier to go look at a light box, right? Like light is the last thing I want in the morning, right? It is helpful then. Studies found it's most helpful then. It does have benefits throughout the remainder of the day. I would not suggest using it late at night though, because our bodies do operate largely off a circadian cycle. And so, after the sun is set, shining a 10,000 lumen light box in your face may impede your sleep. So that may not be the best thing. We do have them in the mindfulness room, free to use. If you want a more private setting, you can reserve one of our consultation rooms. You can book a light therapy session for up to 30 minutes. And during that time, you can read, do homework, just sit and relax, do whatever. Almost anything but fall asleep, because then obviously it's not going to help you. So that's the service that we offer.
Thank you.
Any other questions about caring for self or others, and especially in relation to mental health and wellness on campus? If not, we'll jump to the